front rows. So it was really nice to be able to share some thoughts with y'all, and I'm really curious to hear what you thought and questions that you have, and we'll go from there. Yeah?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so you kind of spoke to this a little bit earlier. Mm-hmm. You were talking about how there are different tactics, especially with the different generations. And so I haven't had an issue, per se, with listening to how past generations have dealt with civil rights issues, in the late 60s and through the Black Panther movement, Black Power movement. But I do sort of have an issue with, like you were saying, how sometimes you come across as kind of condescending by attacking how this generation handles those issues. And I think it has a lot to do with how society doesn't really value our youth in general. And so I just wanted to see, like, what your stance was and the power that this generation and generations under us have.
Such a good question.
Oh, thank you.
So let me start with what you talked about, which is this question of condescension. And I think definitely there's some of that. And then I think there's something, sorry, I gotta grease up,
I hear you.
I'm looking at my hands like I'm ashy, and my mom's like, girl. There's something about what happens when there's a generation coming up after you that you don't understand. So I'm 35. I just turned 35 on the 4th. Capricorn's rule.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. And I realized there's actually a lot of things that I don't understand about people who are 20 years younger than me, 10 years younger than me, 5 years younger than me. There's something that shifts, right? So somebody came up to me and asked me, "You have a Snapchat?" And I was like, "I do, but I don't know how to use it, and I don't understand why. What's the point?" You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
And I think some of that is true also with my relationship to social media, where I think folks who are coming up after me, 5 years and below, really value these platforms, right? In a way that I think my just observation is there's a way in which folk really play out their lives on these platforms that were only, they're newer to me in that way. So I'm telling you those stories because it feels important to just be mindful that it happens to everybody. And so me experiencing that now, I have a lot more compassion for those folks who are like, I don't understand what you're doing. I don't understand it. I don't understand why y'all are raising a ruckus. I don't understand why y'all say black. I mean, some people have a real problem with that even. We're not black. And that's, it's contextual. I don't say African American, that's me. It's no shade, but I'm like, well,
me either.
It's just a thing. It's my own thing, and that's what I'm about. But I do think I agree with you that there is a way in which people disrespect young people. And when I say disrespect, I mean don't value the opinions of young people, don't value the experiences of young people, and don't value the perspective of young people. And youth, being a young person in general in the United States, is looked down upon. And I think that that's unfortunate. And I tried my best to not perpetuate that, even though I don't feel like I'm old. I'm definitely, I think I aged out of being a young person. Depends on who you talk to. 60-year-olds be like, you a young person. I'm like, I got aches and pains too. I guess the last thing I would say about that is we do have to figure it out though. And I see a lot of stuff that troubles me on both ends, right? Like I don't like it when I see older folks disrespect people who they perceive to be younger than them and therefore less experienced or whatever. But I also really don't like it when our folks disrespect elders. And even people who I don't consider elders but who are older than us. You know what I mean? I feel like elders gets reserved for like 60 and above. You're not an elder if you like 40 something. Right? Some people try to claim that. I'm like, no, like a mid-G. You know? And the reason I don't like it is because I think we have a lot to learn from each other. So contextually, you know, for me, for example, the defining parts of my youth was Rodney King being beaten on television. I remember watching that, right? I remember, you know, I listened to NWA when I was younger. You know what I mean? Like, people younger than me don't have that experience. They're like, I know who that is, but I didn't live in that time. I came up when O.J. Simpson was like doing the slow chase through LA, you know? And if it does not fit, you must have quit. Remember that? Maybe not. Okay. See? But for folks coming up after me, like, their defining moment is really different. For a lot of people in this movement, Mike Brown is the defining moment for them. For me, I'm like, it was actually way before Trayvon even. I mean, Oscar Grant was shot 3 blocks from my house, you know? Hurricane Katrina was a real politicizing moment for me. It wasn't Mike Brown. By the time Mike Brown came around, I was like, listen, I've seen some things now, right? But I do think it takes a level of wisdom and compassion to be able to have those cross-generational conversations in a way that really lift up that we all have something to contribute and that we all make a lot of mistakes. I'm really honored to have older people in my life who have been a part of movements. Some of them have stepped back from movements because they were really torn up in it. They tore each other up, and then they themselves were torn up. And it's really helpful to hear that perspective. It's really helpful to hear like how to build with people and how not to cut people off because you don't agree with them. And I'm still working on it. You know,
it's hard.
But then they can also have, if I can have their back, they can have mine. So like when OGs try to come for me, the OGs in my crew be like, no. And then they do their OG thing, and I'm like, I'm just gonna step back now, right? So yeah, I mean, I agree with you, and I guess the thing that I want to leave people with is, it's gonna take all of us. Like I believe in youth-led movements, but I don't think that means that there's no role for people who are not 25 and younger.
Right.
Yeah.
And could you make sure that you say your name and your major and what you're
Sorry, my name is Xandisha Brown. Yeah. I just talked to you earlier. I'm a junior. Well, next semester is my last semester, and I'm in film and media arts, and I'm minoring in African American studies.
Yes, you better go through.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Another question? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Sorry, I won't be as long-winded this time. Hey.
Okay, I'm Bertie Tweet. I'm a senior in Mass Comm. I'm going into teaching next year, not actually doing Mass Comm. But my question for you is, like with Black Lives Matter, once I did more research on it, if you don't do the research, you'll just like, people use it. They just throw it around like insignificantly. Yeah. But when you do research, you see just like how important inclusion is to you guys and just progressing the rights of like the queer community. I was wondering like how do you work like to progress Black humanity, like for all of us, while having to deal with like people who have the same goal but like misogynistic views or like they just want to deal with their own situation.
Yeah. And
your whole thing is inclusion. So like how do you still manage to work with them?
Yeah. Thank you for asking. So I mean, when Patrice and Opal and I started Black Lives Matter, and in particular Patrice and I have known each other for more than a decade. And we shared a particular experience, which is being queer Black women in mostly male-dominated spaces and having to fight for ourselves, having to fight for our voices to be heard, for ideas to be respected, and also having to fight to like be our full selves everywhere that we were. And so as we started to build out this project, it just became really clear for us that the only way that we're going to get to where we want to go is if people can be their full selves. Now, I hear from some folks, well, if I can be my full self and that means I can be misogynist, no, that's not what I'm talking about. You don't get to be an asshole. Excuse my language.
I think we're okay.
We're good.
You're
You're
in good company. You're in good company.
We're trying to work on it. Because,
No,
you know,
be genuine.
sometimes people are like, listen, I'm down for your message, but your language. Sorry. But it doesn't mean that you get to just while out and do whatever you want. And so in that way, I would say that people who come into this movement and don't actually have the goal of people being able to be their full selves, we don't share the same goal. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, good.
And it's actually, there's something in there, right, about, we get baited a lot from folks who are like, we're trying to build a nation, and the only way that we do that is through reproduction and through this like very stereotypical idea of who family and what families are. But here's the thing, like, it's ahistorical. Like, Black people have never, like, when we were brought here, we didn't get to determine who our families were.
Mm-hmm.
We just didn't. It was like not possible. And so given that, right, I think we owe it to the people whose shoulders we stand on to be able to determine who we want our families to be. Whether that's your decision or not, we should still respect it. You know? I know you agree. I'm like, we right here. I know, I've researched this. Here's the other thing though. We have to figure out how to unpack what I think is a pretty toxic version of masculinity in our communities.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say that, I don't, there's nothing wrong with masculinity. There doesn't have to be. There doesn't have to be. So, but I think we have to figure out, like, how can we be ourselves without diminishing other people? You know? And that's the thing that I feel like we haven't yet unpacked, because we do a lot of work around lifting up the experiences of women and queer folks and all of that, right? And I think there's times when people say to me, like, I don't feel like I see myself in this movement, because y'all focus so much on, you know, everybody, but like, this is my very particular experience. And I don't really know how to answer that, to be honest with you. I mean, what I know about me and what I know about our folks is that we come in all shapes and sizes and walks of life. And I know every Black person that I know had an auntie or an uncle, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
With another auntie that was like not really related to you, you know what I mean? They weren't bloodly related.
Play cousins.
You know what I mean? Cousins, roommates, homies. You know what I mean? And I think it's also a myth that Black people are more homophobic than other people. I don't think that's true.
Really?
I don't think that's true.
Well, I only say that because you said on stage 35 years old is the average age for a transgender.
Black transgender woman.
Is that, I don't think Caitlyn Jenner would have gotten the reception if she wasn't
white,
a white male before
and
her.
rich.
And rich before her. So
Rich was.
Yeah. I mean, it's deep, right? Because who paved the way for Caitlyn to be Caitlyn? Black trans women. I know you feel me. I'm making eye contact with you because I haven't been able to do that for the last hour.
She's just staring you down. Right?
Yeah, but the point that I'm trying to make, right, is like, I feel like lots of what happens in our society is on the backs of Black folk. So I don't think that we need to replicate those dynamics in our own community. And I don't believe this narrative that Black people are more homophobic than other people. I think that that is a particular kind of construction. And I think there's also such a thing as like toxic faith, right? That teaches us to disown our actual life experiences, which is that we've grown up with aunties and uncles who wasn't related to us. And, you know, cats lived together for 45 years and that's just what it was. You know what I mean? But we got to figure it out. I want to go back to this toxic masculinity piece, though, because it feels important. There's this thing that is happening that I don't like it. And it's this thing that basically says that we have to restore the black man so that we can restore the race. You know what I'm saying? So here's the thing. There is such a disgusting way that black masculinity is portrayed from outside of our communities. So it makes sense to me that the response would be that we have to protect our own kind of definitions of who we are. But again, like, can we do that in a way that doesn't diminish the influence, the impact, the necessity of people from across the gender spectrum? Even people who are like, I'm not really doing the gender thing. Right. You know? And can we be courageous enough to try to understand what may not be our experience? I think that's like, in the same way that people say all lives matter because they really can't deal with the fact of just like, can we just focus on black people for a minute? Mm-hmm. You know, we do that too. We do that especially with queer communities. We do that with gender nonconforming communities, right? Where it's like, this is somehow taking away from something that I've worked hard for. Mm-hmm. But we're just replicating the same dynamic that we're trying to dismantle. And so we have a lot of work to do in terms of transformation. Yeah, thank you.
I think we have time for 2 more questions.
Hi, I'm Melanie Smith, second-year MBA candidate.
Yes.
We have a connection from Mississippi.
Get your degree.
Yes, this will be my third one.
Yes.
My third one.
But let me start off by saying, I love my blackness and yours. Let me say it again. Lean in. I love my blackness and yours. Yeah. And I wanted to say that because this evening has been about what it means to be black, but we never really unpack what it means to be black because it's this intangible, inherent thing that is us, and that can't be replicated or duplicated or quantified. Or people try it all the time, and it's mind-boggling on some level to me to try and explain what it is to be black because I don't know. Right. I was born into it. This is all I know. Yeah. So I can just tell you what I know, and then you can tell me what you know, and we got a brother in the back who can tell, you know what I'm saying? But my question is, what does it mean to you to be black? Because I can tell you, it means Friday night dinners with my grandma. It means Southern hymns. It means being ratchet but getting 3 degrees. It means being a bird, but like loving classical music and learning to read and playing the piano at 3. That like it's this thing that we all have. And I thought about it today and I was like, oh, I'm gonna be in this because I was watching this video of this Ethiopian dance where they whip their hair, and I'm like, there's something magical because this little black girl made this song about whipping her hair. And unless Willow Smith, who was awesome, saw this video. Do you see where I'm going? Like, there's something that connects us, even though we are completely disconnected and often unheard and misunderstood people. So, in light of happy thoughts, what does it mean to you, Alicia Garza, to be black?
Just came to feel like, boom. I think for me personally, I agree with you. I mean, there's a lot that is about being connected to something that we don't know. Let me say more. You know when like people pour a little out for the homies? Yeah. Like that is attached to traditions that come from the continent. This is true. I mean, it's very similar to the practice of pouring libations, right? So for me, being black is about living inside of contradictions and having to learn how to be comfortable in that, because that's how we've always had to survive. Always.
That's the duality. Life is nothing but a duality. where we are if it wasn't for our oppression. We can't create, we can't grow, we can't flourish. Our melanin cannot shine unless we are in the sun that technically kills. You know? And I like that about being black. Contradictions. Isn't that deep? That's kind of deep.
But I also think that there's something very profound about having been separated and scattered and yet still connected. So I guess the thing for me, and I appreciated your statement about I love my blackness and yours, we have to figure out how to put that into practice. Because I know for me growing up, not all black people liked me.
Let's go.
You're like, yeah. Talk white, or my hair was good, or whatever. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. It's not just once I learned that it wasn't just me, and I was like, well, whatever, right? But I feel like there's something that we can unpack in this piece around being able to sit within contradictions and still come out on top. It's a shorter way of saying it. I think there's something in there that's a movement building lesson. So what does it mean when we all come together and we're not the same? Like, don't come from the same place, don't have the same set of experiences. There's things that connect us. But for example, I mean, this past year in Cleveland, 1,500 black people from all over the world came together, never having met each other before. And it was powerful and complicated. It was powerful and complicated. Like, I remember walking through, because I was at Cleveland State, I remember walking through the quad and people are drumming, people are dancing. Some people are like, I hate the drum. You know what I mean? Like, there's just lots of that. But the thing that I was struck the most by was people were trying to figure out who we were and where we came from and why we came. And that was the thing that kept people together. You know what I mean? Like, people were curious about each other and really just like fundamentally practicing this principle of black love.
Ain't that the best love?
So without being esoteric about it, like, I think we all know what it's like when people don't love their blackness. I mean, I get a lot of questions from black people. Like, what about black on black crime? And I'm like, I'm not understanding. Like, nobody cares about black on black crime more than black people do. Like, can we just sit with that for a second? Who's trying to deal with black on black crime besides black people? You know what I'm saying? Nobody. And even that word, like that phrase, was a way to describe a dysfunction within a people that were considered dysfunctional. Like, I mean, came from a white scientist. And he wasn't really even a scientist, Joe. I mean, we could really get into all this. I just watched a whole documentary on him. He was a mess. He was a mess.
What's the name of it?
What's his name? The
Race scientists? Like back in the day?
The black on black crime dude.
Was he from
No, he was crazy though.
He was crazy. Search Google.
Yeah,
crazy
Google
doctor. Black on black crime.
Kinsey?
No, I think so.
Anywho, it's a way to talk about pathology in black communities. It was a way to describe why there had to be. He was part of the War on Poverty initiatives. Yeah, I mean, we can do a whole history lesson if you want to right now. But all I'm saying is, it is really important for us, and I know we get this thing, and this is what I mean about loving blackness, and I'm situating this conversation there. I hear a lot people say, well, if we really love ourselves, then we have to stop killing each other. And I actually don't disagree with that. But what troubles me about it is that it's it doesn't sit in a context. It's like ahistorical. So it's almost as if Black people have everything we need to survive, and we just can't get it together. Now, if that's how we think about ourselves,
It's like a binary argument.
yeah, like where are we going? Are we moving far? Because the reality is, there's no grouping of people that exists in the world that doesn't have conflict. White people have a lot of conflict. I grew up in a white community, trust me. White people have a lot of conflict. They just hide it better. They have money to hide it. And privilege and all that stuff, you know? So, what if we were to understand violence in our communities as a result of people adapting to really awful conditions? Which isn't to say that there aren't people who shoot other people for no reason. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's not to say that. What it's to say is, well, what would you expect?
Right.
The term, it's so expensive. Like being poor, poverty is the most expensive form of living.
Yeah. Like, what would you expect in a community that has no grocery store?
That makes sense.
What did you expect in a community where the housing is basically not housing?
Where they don't get internet, and so they are behind. Yeah.
What do you expect in communities where, you know, police help stoke tensions between people? What do you expect in places where schools, the students in the schools, they share books? Like, there's not everybody has, like, you have to photocopy chapters of the book and then pass it on to somebody else.
Or where they get fed water with lead in it. For a year and a half.
Yeah, what would you do? How would you be? So, loving us, I think, is about loving our ability to also be human. Loving our ability to also be human. It's not condoning bad behavior, but it's just not making Black people an exception in the sense of only Black people have bad behavior and everybody else has normal behavior. And that's often how the conversation goes. So, anywho, we went on a whole... What do we do in the fireside?
We have one more question. I think we've heard one question and two questions here. Anyone on this side have a question?
This side have a question.
You're going to close this out, okay?
I just wanted to say, thank you so much for bringing up toxic masculinity, because it's like, just, even as a man dealing with that, it's just so, like, it can be infuriating at times, because it's like, I'm in the room right here, and I know most of the women in this room, and like, these are leaders, these are my friends, these are people I know, these are people I respect. Some of these people help my development as a person, and it's just like how sometimes you can not respect them, but at the same time I have to understand and see that like they don't feel like they don't realize that they are being disrespectful, that they are putting them down, that they are crediting their work. And it's just like, I'm pretty sure you talked about it, so you had some experiences with it, but like how just dealing with it, like in general.
Yeah. I don't know. I have my good days and I have my bad days. I'll be honest. I threw shade at somebody today. I did. You see me, huh?
I did.
I try to keep it inside. But, I mean, this is what happens, right? I mean, 35 years old, I have a double degree, been organizing for a long time, you know, and sometimes when I interact with men, and the first thing they do is call me baby or sugar or sweetheart. I'm like, I'm a grown woman.
You can do whatever you want.
Don't
I'm
go
not
back.
your baby. You know what I mean? I'm not your
You're
baby.
Yep.
And you're too grown to be talking to a grown woman like I'm 5 years old. So yes, I have shade. I dealt with it though.
It was necessary.
But you understand what I mean? So sometimes I have good days and sometimes I have bad days. It was necessary. That was next level. But ultimately, I mean, the thing I've learned in organizing is I meet a lot of people that don't agree with me. like, so when I'm door knocking and I'm trying to, you know, organize in my community, and the brother I'm talking to is talking to me like I'm 5, or talking to me like I'm some girl he's seen in a video.
Mm-hmm.
How do I balance respect for myself and also the level of like patience and humility and also compassion for like what we're battling,
Right.
to keep the conversation going? It's an everyday struggle. That's all I got.
And I think you mentioned it a little bit in our conversations, and also just in your wonderful keynote address, you know, that masculinity, that patriarchy exists when men aren't around either.
Mm-hmm.
So when we correct each other in the eyes and in the forms of that masculinity, it's also very toxic. I know that you were talking to me a little bit about that. So
Yeah. Ciao.
well, we want to thank you so much. Please give a big round of applause. To recognize one other person who usually doesn't get recognized for a lot of the work that she does, and the fact that and I'm not trying to throw shade. First of all, do not come at me with your text message. Ooh, Chrissy shade. But the fact that this person thought of having the idea of bringing you here, and our committee working so hard to make that happen. And even our committee was like, oh, who's this person? And that's how we learn, right? Miss Shonda Allen Mitchell, could you please stand up for us? It was an amazing event, well attended, and I promise you, the line for the signing was the longest that we've ever seen, and it's because you do connect. You connect with us, and we thank you so much.
I want to take a point of personal privilege. I want to say thank you so much for coming. I know that our students often see the university as the force to push against, but I thought that it was necessary to have you here because I know I've been here a number of years and students can be very apathetic. But in this last year, I really have seen students galvanize again around something. And so I thought it was important for them to come and hear you and your other sisters talk about what I think is a very important moment, as you said, in their growth and in their history. So thank you so much for being here.
And just so y'all know, Patrice is 8 months pregnant, and so that's why she's like not traveling anymore, even though she'd be trying it. But she's not to. And you know, just the 3 of us, we have a lot. We all have other jobs. This is not our paid work. We don't do this. We don't get money for this. So we love y'all. Sometimes we can't all be together, but it doesn't mean that we don't all